He was just 3 years old. One moment, he was carefree, walking along a winding forest trail in picturesque Montana, accompanying a church group. The next, he was gone. Not a single cry broke the forest silence. No trace of a struggle remained on the ground. He simply vanished, as if dissolving into thin air. The events of that fateful day continue to haunt everyone involved, and the deeper you delve into the story, the more inexplicable and chilling it becomes. This isn't just a case of someone getting lost in the wilderness. This is the story of Ethan Blackwood. Ethan Blackwood, as mentioned, was only 3 years old. He had inquisitive eyes full of curiosity and an inexhaustible, playful energy that could light up any space he entered. Always smiling, always eager for new discoveries, he was a bright, adventurous child deeply attached to his family. His bond with his father, Marcus, and older sister, Sophia, was exceptionally strong. This small family led a quiet yet meaningful life, cherishing every moment spent together. Marcus Blackwood was devoted to raising his children alone. Throughout his life, he harbored a deep love for nature and dedicated himself to mentoring youth, guiding them through exciting wilderness adventures. His beliefs also led him to join a local group that provided much-needed support and a sense of community for individuals like Marcus, who became a single father after separating from Ethan's mother, Sarah Johnson. This group often assisted Marcus with his parenting responsibilities and actively involved his family in various social events and outings. It was through this close connection that the Attaro family also became actively involved in the group's activities. In search of a more deliberate and mindful way of life, Marcus decided to leave the hustle and bustle of the fast-paced city. He moved his family to Crystal Canyon, Montana, nestled picturesquely within the Great Bear National Forest. There, he and his twin brother, Aaron, jointly managed a small mountain resort. This location offered a peaceful rhythm of life, surrounded by rugged yet majestic landscapes and quiet, secluded trails. This natural world became a true home for Ethan and Sophia. Ethan particularly thrived in this environment. He possessed a fearless curiosity, always eager to run ahead on the trails, loudly call out the names of animals he encountered, and spot birds hidden in the treetops. Nature for him wasn't just a backdrop, it was his boundless playground. This fearless spirit, full of wonder and a thirst for knowledge, was everything Marcus hoped to foster in his son. However, what brought Ethan so much joy in these vast spaces soon became a tragic and painful part of their shared history. On a crisp October day in 1999, a small group of people gathered near the Attaro family's mountain resort. By this point, the group had evolved into something more than just a circle of friends. They were now bound by a shared faith and enjoyed spending time in nature together, strengthening their ties. Over time, they had grown especially close to the Attaro family and, in particular, to Marcus Blackwood, Ethan's father. Because of this deep trust, Marcus agreed to allow his two children, Ethan and his older sister Sophia, to join the group on a planned outing to a nearby state wildlife preserve. The idea behind this excursion was simple and straightforward. The children were to have a safe, controlled trip where they could learn about trout, local wildlife, and the environment. On the morning of October 2nd, the group excitedly assembled, with the children eagerly anticipating the day's adventures. All participants expected a calm and predictable day, assuming a joint walk to a local fish hatchery, a well-known and popular spot, ideal for families and children. However, en route, the adults suddenly decided to change the original plan. Without notifying Marcus or obtaining his approval, they opted for a detour, heading on to the Lone Falcon Trail. This decision surprised many, as the Lone Falcon Trail was not considered a typical route for family outings. It was a scenic path that wound along the Crystal River, renowned for its breathtaking views and serene beauty. The late autumn sun filtered through tall pines and aspens, casting golden hues on the forest floor, creating an idyllic scene. Yet, beneath this tranquil surface, the trail was deceptive and challenging. It was narrow and uneven, with numerous rocky sections. Steep drop-offs bordered parts of the trail, and dense wilderness surrounded hikers, creating a sense of isolation and detachment from the outside world. Cell service was sparse here, making it significantly difficult to call for help in an emergency. Despite these obvious risks, the group continued, taking the children with them. Ethan, then only 3 years old, was the youngest in the group. His small stature and youthful energy made him stand out. The adults, unfortunately, did not take extra precautions to keep him close. No one held his hand or watched him carefully as the trail wound through the dense forest. As the hike progressed, the group began to spread out, with some moving quickly and others lagging behind, creating significant gaps between participants. Ethan was naturally curious and full of life. He walked with enthusiasm, often ahead of the adults. His bright eyes absorbed every detail of the forest, from the rustling leaves underfoot to the shimmering river below. Witnesses later described him as a happy and fearless child, exploring the world with the boundless enthusiasm characteristic of his age. At one point on the trail, two fishermen were casting their lines at a bend in the river. It was here that they noticed a small boy walking alone. He was wearing a white t-shirt and simple blue jeans. The boy walked calmly, without hesitation or signs of distress. The fishermen paid him little mind, assuming he was part of the larger group they had seen nearby. They did not know he was alone, and that this would be the last confirmed sighting of Ethan Blackwood. Just moments later, a piercing scream ripped through the quiet forest air. It was a sharp, high-pitched sound, sudden and echoing through the trees. The scream startled everyone close enough to hear it, including the fishermen. But it lasted only a few seconds, and no one could say for certain where it came from or what caused it. No other noises followed. No crying, no calls for help. After the scream, silence quickly returned to the trail, as if nothing had happened. According to Sophia, the scream was ambiguous, sounding simultaneously like an attack on someone or a playful shout, as if someone was about to catch Ethan. Soon, the group realized something was terribly wrong. Ethan was gone. At first, they thought he might have run ahead and simply gone out of sight for a moment. But as they began calling his name and searching the area, panic began to mount. There was no sign of the little boy anywhere on the trail or in the surrounding forest. The day, which had begun with innocent plans for a controlled family outing, took an unexpected and terrifying turn, marking the beginning of one of Montana's most mysterious disappearances. After the piercing scream echoed through the forest, the group immediately began searching for Ethan. However, in the confusion and shock of the moment, no one immediately called for outside help. Instead, the adults spread out along the trail, their voices strained as they called Ethan's name through the dense trees and rocky terrain. The crisp mountain air carried their anxious cries, but the forest responded only with an ominous silence. Time passed slowly, the golden afternoon gradually giving way to the early shadows of evening. The group's growing despair was palpable, each minute stretching endlessly as hope began to inexorably fade. Nevertheless, despite their dedicated efforts, the search remained limited to the immediate area of the disappearance. No one in the group contacted authorities or attempted to coordinate a broader, organized search. Meanwhile, back at the Crystal River Resort, Marcus Blackwood was unaware of the escalating crisis unfolding in the forest. Long hours passed before someone returned, breathless and deeply distressed, to inform him of Ethan's disappearance. The news crushed Marcus. His heart clenched with unbearable pain as he grappled with disbelief and overwhelming fear, realizing his youngest son had vanished without a trace on a trail he had never approved for outings. Marcus broke down emotionally, got into his car, beat his chest, and repeated, as if in a delirium, "They lost my baby. They lost my baby." As the sun set behind the majestic mountain peaks, emergency services immediately sprang into action. Local law enforcement promptly joined forces with Riverwood County search and rescue teams. News of the missing child spread quickly, and federal agencies were soon involved, providing specialized resources for the large-scale search effort. David Miller, now recently retired Riverwood County Deputy Sheriff, was in charge of the search for Ethan. "Absolutely. I thought we'd find him," he recalled. "Yeah, he was a little kid, but I thought we could get in there with our people and do what we do and what we've done hundreds of times. Find a person. It might take a few hours to find a child crying or hiding somewhere nearby, but we'd be done by midnight." Miller went to his car for a quick nap just before midnight, telling his staff to wake him when they found the boy. When he woke up the next morning in the front seat of his pickup truck, anxiety washed over him as he realized Ethan was still missing. A massive search for Ethan Blackwood began, but the search itself was hampered by numerous difficulties and obstacles. What should have been a coordinated rescue operation quickly devolved into something else entirely. This was no longer just a missing person case. It was confusion, chaos, and a true disaster both on the ground and in the air, as law enforcement, volunteers, and military personnel scoured the steep and unforgiving terrain of the Lone Falcon Trail in Montana's Great Bear National Forest. They faced a situation as treacherous as it was emotionally overwhelming. Time was relentlessly ticking away. The trail was growing cold, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. Then, disaster struck. During the aerial portion of the search, a UH-1 Huey helicopter from an Air Force base was dispatched to assist in the difficult mountain terrain. It first flew to a regional airport for refueling, then re-entered the mountain corridor to aid ground search teams from above. On board were 4 military crew members and Kevin Foster, a member of the Riverwood County Search and Rescue. Foster wasn't even supposed to be on that flight. He had relieved his colleague, Thomas Green, from duty and was persuaded to join the crew to help coordinate ground search strategy. Foster genuinely wanted to help. He wanted to make a difference. But minutes after returning to the harsh high-altitude forest, the helicopter began experiencing severe difficulties. The weight of the fuel load combined with the thin mountain air created a perfect storm that led to tragedy. The aircraft stalled. Foster remembered the moment vividly. He was lying on the floor of the helicopter with the door open when he uttered the chilling phrase over the intercom, "We need altitude, now." The co-pilot's reply was terrifying and final. "I know, but I can't. We're going down." It was that moment when time slows, when a person realizes they are no longer in control, and that something terrible is about to happen. The helicopter blades clipped the treetops. One of the blades shattered. Debris flew like shrapnel into the forest. As Foster tried to close the door, a large severed tree branch pierced the open hatch, striking a military medic in the face and fracturing his eye socket. Moments later, a crushing impact. The helicopter slammed into the forest, disintegrating on impact with the ground. It broke into 3 separate pieces, like a toy smashed against the earth. Yet, the 2 jet engines continued to emit a piercing scream, still running as fuel continued to burn inside. This eerie noise echoed for hours until the tanks finally ran dry. The military crew, though shaken and injured, managed to extract themselves from the wreckage. But Foster was not as fortunate. He was thrown and pinned, unconscious, with severe injuries. A 13-inch wound on his leg exposed his femur. He sustained a severe concussion, 3 fractured vertebrae, and a broken shoulder. He later stated that he only got on that flight to try and find Ethan, to do something useful. Instead, he nearly lost his own life. Nearby search and rescue members rushed to the crash site. They found the helicopter in ruins, parts scattered across the forest floor like the wreckage of a giant bird. When they reached the debris, they smashed a window to pull Foster out, saving his life. But emotionally, Foster was shattered. The search for a missing child had now led to a military crash and nearly claimed more lives. And this was just the beginning of the chaos. On the ground, things were no better. With the helicopter crash drawing all attention, the media descended on the area like a second, more destructive storm. According to Riverwood County Sheriff Chris Davis, who was a sergeant at the time, the situation exploded almost overnight. "We had rescuers being carried out on stretchers. We had a child missing overnight. We had the Air Force shutting down the crash site. And then," he said, "we had 17 satellite TV channels lined up simultaneously along Highway 93. Anchors in fur coats were walking the trail." Ethan's disappearance was no longer just a local tragedy. It had become a national media event, capturing the country's attention. With all the pressure, confusion, and spectacle that brings, it was now being compared to another Montana case that had gripped the nation, the unsolved murder of JonBenet Ramsey. What followed blurred the line between a serious search and a veritable circus. Psychics called in with tips, offering supernatural insights into Ethan's whereabouts. A barefoot man arrived with a donkey, insisting he could track the boy. A Native American spiritual leader performed rituals, asking the mountain itself to give up the child. The situation became surreal, and all the while, volunteers and professional teams continued to scour riverbanks, climb steep slopes, and dive into cold mountain waters. Planes flew overhead, their hum echoing across the forest. Every inch of the terrain was combed, yet still nothing. And amidst all this, Marcus Blackwood, Ethan's father, watched the entire scene descend into chaos. His son was missing, and now the whole world was watching, but not necessarily helping. In a later interview, Marcus admitted it became a tornado, a hurricane, the biggest storm of our lives. He trusted the professionals, but the whirlwind of media mishaps and strange distractions consumed the search, diverting resources and attention. "I was critical of them at the time," Marcus said. "When you're in a survival situation, you want everything possible to be done. And at times I thought they could have done so much more." Amidst this storm, Marcus Blackwood found himself under intense public scrutiny. Instead of sympathy and support, he faced suspicion and accusations. Strangers sent harsh letters and emails, accusing the family of negligence or worse. Some went so far as to suggest Ethan's disappearance was due to spiritual causes or curses. Others whispered bizarre stories, sometimes referencing local folklore or religious rhetoric. Despite the setbacks, for many, hope remained alive. Though clouded by a whirlwind of controversy and emotional strain, the mission to bring Ethan home was no longer just the search for one boy. It had become a complex, tangled story where fear, suspicion, and human emotions wrestled with the unforgiving wilderness. After the frantic chaos of the initial search, the world slowly began to move on. But Marcus Blackwood refused to let go. For him, the search was far from over. It became his life's mission. Every day since Ethan's disappearance, Marcus pressed forward with relentless determination, clinging to the fragile yet unwavering hope that his son was still out there, waiting to be found. He plastered every available surface with missing person flyers, storefronts, telephone poles, community centers, even gas stations far beyond Montana. Each poster bore Ethan's smiling face and a plea for any information that could shed light on his fate. He handed them out personally when he could, his voice steady but his heart heavy, asking strangers if they had seen anything at all, that might help. Numerous interviews followed. Local news stations repeatedly invited him, and occasionally national programs covered the case, bringing widespread attention. Marcus spoke openly about his boundless love for Ethan, the unbearable pain of the unknown, and his absolute refusal to give up. These moments were difficult but necessary, a way to keep the story alive and reach out to anyone who might possess the missing piece of the puzzle. Behind the scenes, sleepless nights took their toll. Marcus spent countless hours poring over old reports, searching public records, and checking every lead. No matter how small or unlikely, he maintained contact with law enforcement, volunteer groups, and even psychics, anyone who claimed to have any information. Each call filled him with hope, and just as quickly shattered it. But months turned into years, and the trail grew cold. No credible tips came in. No new sightings, no physical evidence. The once active search efforts dwindled to occasional checks and quiet prayers. The ache of the unknown settled into a constant throb beneath the surface of daily life. Media interest faded. Headlines stopped appearing. News stories replaced the missing boy's face in newspapers and on television screens. To the public, the case was all but forgotten. Just another unsolved mystery, lost to time. And yet, in the quiet shadows, something remained. An unspoken presence that refused to disappear. For Marcus and those who never gave up, Ethan's disappearance was not a closed chapter, but an open wound, waiting for answers. Somewhere beyond the years of silence, hope quietly persisted. In 2003, businessmen James Anderson and Michael Brown were hiking together in the Crystal Canyon area, not far from the Lone Falcon Trail. The dense canopy filtered the sunlight, casting eerie patterns on the forest floor. As the hikers rounded a bend near a narrow ravine, something unusual caught their eye. A flash of color amidst the brown leaves and moss. Approaching cautiously, they stumbled upon partial human remains, including a cluster of clothing positioned almost unnaturally at the edge of a rocky outcrop. There lay a brown fleece sweater, blue pants, and the sneakers Ethan was wearing when he disappeared. Forensic teams soon arrived and meticulously collected the remains, treating the site with the utmost respect and precision. Further searches uncovered a human molar and a large fragment of a human skull. DNA testing at the time indicated an 86% probability that the remains belonged to Ethan. More modern DNA testing showed the remains were 100% Ethan's. Instead of burying or cremating the remains, Marcus Blackwood chose to keep them, creating a sanctuary for Ethan out of his old bedroom, preserving it exactly as it was before his disappearance, with the skull fragment kept among Ethan's beloved toys and belongings. According to Marcus, "I'm at peace, and I know I'll see Ethan again someday. I'll look at him and say, 'Ethan, what happened?' He'll look at me and say, 'Dad, does it matter?'" The identification of Ethan Blackwood's remains in 2003 should have brought closure, but instead, it opened a floodgate of questions that no one could answer. Initially, investigators leaned towards a familiar explanation, a mountain lion attack. It was a theory that made superficial sense. Montana's wilderness is a natural home for cougars, and small children are tragically vulnerable in such environments. Officials initially assumed Ethan might have wandered too far from the group and fallen victim to one of these powerful predators. However, this theory quickly unraveled under closer scrutiny and analysis. Wildlife experts and forensic analysts began raising red flags, pointing out significant inconsistencies. The condition of Ethan's clothing did not match the typical signs of an animal attack. His sweater, pants, and sneakers showed no claw marks, tears, or bloodstains, details that would be expected if a cougar had attacked. The clothing was strangely intact, and in some cases eerily preserved, which in itself raised questions. Even more puzzling was that the remains were not scattered. A mountain lion typically drags prey to a secluded spot and dismembers it over time, leaving bones likely far apart, damaged or not. But Ethan's bones were found near his clothing in a relatively concentrated area with no signs of predation. The scene did not suggest a struggle, it suggested stillness, as if the body had simply been left. Then there was the question of the pants. Why were they inside out? Forensic anthropologists found this detail disturbing. While children sometimes undress in confusion or fear, it is extremely rare. And, given the terrain and Ethan's age, it's hard to imagine him removing his pants at all, let alone turning them inside out in the process. Another chilling inconsistency was the discovery site itself. The location where the clothing and bones were found was hundreds of feet above the trail, nearly 500 vertical feet up steep, rocky terrain. It was a brutal climb even for experienced hikers. Ethan was 3 years old, weighed just over 40 pounds, and was wearing sneakers. No one could explain how he could have reached such an elevation on his own, let alone survived long enough to get there without being seen or heard. This geographical enigma sparked more than just curiosity, it ignited deep suspicion. Some began to wonder if Ethan had been there at all, at least not until a later time. Could it be that someone had moved his remains? That the discovery site was not the original scene, but a carefully chosen location designed to confuse or mislead the investigation? The abduction theory, once considered unlikely, re-entered the conversation. Perhaps Ethan had been taken that day, and for unknown reasons, his remains were returned or planted years later. As speculation grew, darker theories emerged. Some whispered of a cover-up, of key details that had been hidden or overlooked. Others speculated about sinister forces, both human and otherwise. From wilderness crime conspiracies to supernatural or ritualistic explanations, the lack of a clear narrative left a vacuum that the public and media were quick to fill. Yet, despite all the theories, nothing fit perfectly. No single explanation accounted for all the evidence: the intact clothing, the clustered remains, the impossible ascent, the lack of injuries, the years of silence. What happened to Ethan Blackwood remains one of the most disturbing mysteries in modern wilderness missing person cases. Not just because he vanished, but because the answers, when they finally came, made even less sense than the disappearance itself. To this day, those who work on the case are divided. Former law enforcement, trackers, and even family members continue to debate what happened. One retired search coordinator stated plainly, "This case has no closure because it makes no sense. Every theory falls apart at some point." That's the problem. Another noted, "I've seen mountain lion attacks. This wasn't one of them, but I've also worked abduction cases, and this wasn't typical either." For Marcus Blackwood, the father who searched for decades for the truth, none of the theories matter more than the ultimate reality. His son is gone, and despite the discovery of his remains, the true story of what happened that day in the Montana wilderness may never be fully known. From the beginning, Marcus's mission was clear. He would not let his son become an unsolved case or a faded photograph forgotten by time. Ethan mattered. His story mattered. And Marcus was going to make sure the world remembered, even in his absence. But Marcus didn't stop there. He channeled his pain into purpose, transforming a personal tragedy into a public mission. He wrote a book, detailing every moment of Ethan's story. From the innocent hike that turned tragic, to the long nights of searching, and the endless fight for answers. In its pages, he didn't just recount what happened. He exposed the failures, the shortcomings, and the unanswered questions surrounding his son's disappearance. He became an advocate, not just for Ethan, but for every parent who has ever been left in the shadow of a vanished child. He called for better safety protocols in national parks, clearer communication in emergencies, and greater accountability from those who lead search efforts. He spoke out. He gave interviews. He stood before microphones, cameras, and strangers, reliving his deepest pain because he believed it could prevent another family from enduring the same heartbreak. For Marcus, advocacy wasn't heroism. It was love, the fierce, undying love of a father who refused to give up. A father who looked into the void and chose to speak, even when it hurt. He met resistance. Not everyone wanted to stir up old wounds. Some people wanted him to move on, accept the official narrative, and let go. But Marcus couldn't. Not when so many questions remained. Not when the answers didn't add up. Not when his gut, his heart, and the evidence whispered the same haunting truth. There's more to this story. In the years that followed, Marcus connected with other families who had lost children mysteriously. Some in national parks, others in small towns or dense forests. Together, they formed a silent network of pain and persistence, supporting each other. Their stories were different, but their grief was the same. Today, Marcus Blackwood is not just a grieving father. He is a symbol of strength, a man who refused to disappear, a voice that still echoes in the halls of justice and in the hearts of those who listen. He once said, "I don't want people to feel sorry for me. I want them to remember Ethan. I want them to ask questions. I want them to care." And because of him, many do. Ethan Blackwood may be gone, but thanks to his father's relentless fight, his story lives on, not just as a mystery, but as a call to never stop searching for the truth. Marcus Blackwood was once stalked by a man claiming to be Ethan himself. Marcus obtained a restraining order against the man. When the restraining order was violated, the man was arrested. The discovery of Ethan's remains and the DNA match disproved the man's claims, and authorities believe the man was either mentally ill or seeking attention. To this day, the case officially remains unsolved. 2 books have been published focusing on Ethan Blackwood's case. Ethan Blackwood's death prompted Montana Governor Brian Schweitzer to declare September 8th as Ethan Blackwood Recreational Safety Awareness Week. Marcus Blackwood had the opportunity to present the proclamation from Governor Brian Schweitzer to Assistant Principal Emily White at the high school where Marcus also worked as a teacher. Concluding on this note, there remains a persistent, agonizing question. What truly happened on that trail in the Montana wilderness? Why did a healthy, happy child vanish in a matter of minutes without a trace? And how could the forest remain silent for 4 long years, only to return his remains in such a perplexing state that it generated more questions than answers? Was it nature, a tragic accident that searchers simply missed in the chaos of the early days? Or was there something darker at play, something that defies all logical explanation and common sense? Some mysteries, alas, leave behind more questions than answers, and Ethan Blackwood's case is undoubtedly one of them. We may never fully understand exactly how Ethan disappeared. We may never know what he experienced during those long years he was gone, or if he was alone in his final resting place. But one thing is certain. Someone, somewhere, knows more than is available to the public. While investigators archived reports and newspaper headlines gradually faded, losing their urgency, a father kept the flame of hope and the search alive, not for closure, but for clarity. He reminded us that not every mystery ends in resolution, and not every truth is fully revealed. The mountains of Montana, in the end, returned Ethan's remains, but they did not return his story, which is still hidden among the trees, shrouded in a veil of unsolved enigmas.